Hello, Melissa and Scott. Megan here with a weird and fun update. Um, I don't even know how to describe what you're about to see, but I will preface it with this. My friend Katie makes stop motion Lego videos, and a while ago I asked her if she'd be willing to collaborate on an essay project, and she was. So here it is, I guess. Bedazzled.
My grandparents met over coffee. Well, they didn't really meet over coffee, but the story is neater that way. Really, they would have met at some unremarkable neighborly moment. A picnic, maybe, or to return a casserole dish. Jenny might have seen her 9-year-old son Marvin do the job, and that was when 4-year-old Pat met him and said to her older sister Naomi, "I'm going to marry that Marvin Slykehouse one day." I know little else of when they were young, but I know something of coffee. I started drinking coffee when I was 2 years old. There's a picture of me on my grandmother's back refrigerator. In it, I'm wearing pink and white pajamas, sitting at the table with Grandpa. My tiny feet dangle from the kitchen chair, little toes combing the air. I would have been taken on a visit back before we moved to Iowa permanently because we arrived that time on my third birthday and I got a different set of pajamas that year. A Barbie nightgown, if you're interested. The mug in the photo is small and tan, plastic, with an indiscriminate comic printed on it. Sort of like Peanuts, but not quite. No beagle, you see, but with a little brown dog whose name could have been Spot. The coffee in question was, of course, mostly milk. It makes sense. If Grandpa had wanted me to hate coffee, he would have given it to me black. Trusting this man, who so often gave me ice cream or chocolate milk, I would have taken a swig and spat it back out, coughing and swearing off the bitter drink forever. Forever would last, maybe until age 13, I think, when we started riding the bus home after school. Grandma and Grandpa would visit with us, Grandma eventually persuading me to try some coffee with creamer in it, and I would learn to like it slowly. Had he given me black coffee that first time, Grandpa would have laughed his startled laugh, a sound I spent 17 years learning to love and the rest learning to miss. It would have been a funny moment, a good joke. But Grandpa wasn't in it for the joke. Grandpa was in it for the stories. When Grandpa got sick, there were dozens of papers: bills, cancer pamphlets, insurance information. Mom remarked that they needed a binder. This was my era of aluminum foil, Elmer's liquid glue by the gallon, Mod Podge glossy finish, and tissue paper. I spent my free time covering paper folders, pizza boxes, and broken 3-rings with whatever it needed to hold together, duct tape and glue, and then with pictures printed from the internet, quotes on transparency sheets, and patterned paper. Glitter glue was often also involved. When Mom said that Grandpa and Grandma needed one, I went to my stash and picked out a 2.5-inch binder. I duct taped the cover back to the spine, cut my pieces of aluminum foil, painted it with glue, and pressed new armor over the broken book. It stayed like that, covered in foil but otherwise unfinished, for weeks. The stacks grew. Only when it was suggested that we buy a new binder did I finish the project. I went with light and dark blue tissue paper, one layer, so that the foil could make it gleam, ribbons, a polka dot pattern, and an adaptation of a sign my aunt had purchased from my grandmother's kitchen. The sign said, "Grandma never runs out of hugs or cookies." I typed it out in pretty font, crease-licked tore the lines into feather-edged strips, and adhered it to the front cover. On the back, I added, "Grandpa never runs out of coffee or stories." And looking back, sure, it's trite, kitschy, but Grandpa smiled when he read it. "Never runs out of stories," he mused with his characteristic mouth quirk and a small head shake. He laughed a little, too. I don't remember how it sounded. Sitting in the buttery afternoon light of their kitchen, my cornered periwinkle coffee mug warming the ache from my palms, my grandpa took his army duffel from its spot in the closet. One of the handles was broken, so he carried it gingerly to the table. The worn gray-green canvas made the wooden table seem very yellow and overwarm, like a mellowed slice of sun had been sitting all these years under dishes heavy with dinner, only noticed in relief to the fatigued baggage. The zipper took some doing, but eventually it stumbled open. Out limped stacks of pictures, each shouldering a story. My grandpa with a white skirt on over his jeans and cotton shirt, among a small crowd of nameless blurry faces. In uniform at Fort Hood. The stories he remembered, though the names were lost to him. I wish I'd written them down, he said, flipping the photos over to stare at the blank reverse. But then he'd smile a little, shake his head slightly, and go on. Always another anecdote. There were many girls, too, in the photographs. Women, rather. Every one of them wanted to marry my grandpa. He didn't say so, though my mother told me that one of the girls had proposed to him, but time did not soften the longing on their faces. He could have been a spaghetti western star with that dark hair and those blue eyes. He was handsome, my grandpa, a Texas soldier and an Idaho cowboy. I wondered aloud how he ended up back here, the little Iowa community complicated with memory. I've got it figured out, he said, nodding. See, your grandma had her hooks in me so deep that whenever I got too far away, and here he mimed the reeling in of fishing line. Well, Marvin, groused Grandma from her chair in the living room, you could have cut those strings any time you wanted to. And Grandpa just smiled sadly, shaking his head a little. Grandma never was much for pretty words. It took years for them to make sense to her. Some 18 months after his death, she told me that mornings were hard, especially Mondays. Every day when they woke up, he said, "Good morning, beautiful," to which she responded one Monday, "What's so beautiful about it, Marvin?" I can almost see his half smile, that little shake of his head. It's beautiful because I'm here with you. Before he died, Grandma did not care for those words, for such an impractical form of affection. When she told me about it, though, she began sobbing. I stared for a moment, unsure of where to look, what to say, or what to do with my hands. I settled for wrapping my arms around her. More coffee? I asked. It wasn't until college that I realized my family drinks weak coffee. One evening, my freshman year roommate read the instruction grid on the back of a sleeve of coffee while she tried to brew a pot. Okay, so 6 tablespoons. I looked up from my book. That seems like too much. Your pot holds 6 cups, right? Yeah. Yeah, so this says it's 1-to-1. Here, Julia, I hopped up from the yoga mat where I was prone to reading that fall. Toes, palms, feet, an echo of the push-ups I had done that day. Let me eyeball it. She spooned 6 tablespoons into the coffee filter. Yeah, no, I said, shaking my head. You only need like half of that. Her mouth opened a little bit, preparing to refer again to the package's instructions, but she didn't say anything. I had been drinking coffee for 17 years, after all. Surely I knew something she did not. I'd learned to make coffee at my grandparents' house, of course. When the afternoon pot of coffee proved an insufficient amount for the 5 of us, my grandma, Grandpa, brother, sister, and me, it seemed only appropriate that I learn how to make a fresh pot. Grandpa oversaw the endeavor. 3 heaping scoops, he told me. Grandma, from the living room, amended. 4. 3, he said back louder. 4, she snapped. God damn it, he muttered, dropping the scoop into the grounds. He took a breath and fished it back out. And there again was the corked mouth, the slight shake of his head. His warm voice. 3 scoops. 3 heaping scoops, my grandmother conceded. Grandpa nodded, turning to dump the water into the well of the coffee maker. When his back was turned, she mouthed, 4, to me. When my grandparents first started dating, my grandmother was 20. Grandpa was 25. No one had any money. They could have gone out. She might have been able to get them a discount at Babe's if she could stomach coming in with a date on her day off, but they didn't. They could have gone roller skating. My grandpa was so good that a professional wanted to train him, the story goes, but they didn't do that either. Instead, they drank coffee. They could sit and visit for hours without feeling pressured to order anything. She would tell him about working for Babe, a former Chicago mobster who always let priests, nuns, and soldiers eat for free at the restaurant. He would tell her about his time out west. There was no waitress to tip. The only cost really was the coffee grounds. 1 can every 2 weeks could be budgeted for socializing. Strong coffee would mean fewer visits, so they drank it weak. On solitary mornings now, I lose track of numbers while I pile grounds into the filter. 8 scoops, maybe, or 9. I almost always make a full pot, forgetting that I live alone. I make my coffee stronger than they do, but I still like it to be half milk. Drinking it any other way feels like a small betrayal to the man and the little girl frozen on Grandma's back fridge. My grandparents, they met over coffee. Well, they didn't. Not really. But the story is neater that way.